What's up, everybody? Another new edition of Celtics Beat. Great to have you here with us. It is January 14th. I know I mentioned that, but I'm saying it again because it's my mom's birthday. So even though I know she's not out there listening, happy birthday, Mom.
Happy
Way to
birthday.
be. I'll text you later on.
Happy
We're going to get
birthday.
into a whole lot of Celtic stuff. We got Mark Murphy of the Herald, good friend of the program. Of course, Evan Valenti. I'm back here with you. Missed last week's show. Evan kind enough to take the reins on that one with Chris Grenham. So
that was a very emotional show, Kaufman. If you had, I couldn't believe
I all over Twitter, people were talking about how emotional it was.
Out of all the shows you could have missed, like that's the one I feel like you should have been a part of. You know, like that was such a coming right off that Knicks loss. I mean, it was right after the loss. It was like I was on fire that night. I was texting you all night.
Yeah.
And I was like, I gotta get I spent so much time trying to get my thoughts together after the game and writing it down because I'm like, I need to get the emotion that's in here on the screen. So when I go at it tomorrow morning, I still have that pent up energy. And I was so mad, upset, angry, emotional, all that stuff all wrapped up in one.
Well, you just described the players after that game. They were in the same state of mind.
Although it's kind of too bad that you waited until the next morning. I feel like that was if ever there were a good time for this show to have like a live post-game Periscope, or I don't even think Periscope exists, but a live Twitter, thing in the same way that, people can check out our partners over at the Garden Report right after a game. That would have been a good situation for you. Just turn on the camera, turn on the mic, and let's go.
Yeah, I should have texted Xanis to be like, have me on your show right now because I'm about to tear everybody a new one.
I got things to say.
I was so, and the worst part was you could just see it coming. Like as soon as the third quarter started, it didn't get off to a great start. It's like, oh my goodness, if they're gonna blow this game, the Knicks, they were up 25 in this game, and then sure enough, by the start of the fourth quarter, it was a 2-point game after the first 2 minutes of fourth quarter. It was like. This is impossible that this season is happening. And again, we had just spent so much time the week prior talking about how the Minnesota loss has to be the worst loss of the season. And then a week later, they just topped it. And then luckily, to try and make it full circle here, boys, we've gotten back on track here. The Celtics have started.
But that's the thing. That's the thing. They lose to the Knicks, obviously, in the fashion that they did, and it was terrible. And it's Bobby Valentine once famously said, it's like if this isn't rock bottom, we're finding new ends of the earth, or whatever that quote was. They go out, they blow out the Knicks, and then they take the home and home from the Pacers, first the overtime squeaker, and then they blow them out in Indiana. My guy Domantas Sabonis, and Here we are, 3 straight wins, boys, for the first time since November. They're back to 500. They're back in the play-in tournament in terms of where the standings are right now. Everything's fine. It's fine. It's fine. We're good. We're good. Trade deadline. All of a sudden, all the articles are screw sellers. Celtics they're gonna be adding at this point, whether it will be fringe moves or the big moves. Mark. Now we're back on track. Now we're getting ready to gas up the duck boats.
And they're in 10th place in the Eastern Conference, so 2 losses and they're back to where we were. But it's a start, and I thought that the game against Indiana, the second game, just the Jays both going over 30. It just offensively, it's the best they've looked, and I think. I don't know. They're trying to figure out different ways to play them off each other, and I think that's huge. Tatum has acknowledged that. He's said, we can't be taking turns. We've got to be in a flow. And I think, the Indy game, that was a pretty good example of what they can do.
So like you said, they both go for 30 plus. It was 67 combined points. They're both averaging well over 20. They're great when they are on the floor together, despite what people may say or think. And, I can't even fathom how tired these guys must be of being asked if they can coexist and if they support one another. Like you're never, regardless of how they may really feel. And I actually do believe that what they're saying is true, but let's just say that you don't. Let's say that you believe that they're just saying the right things and they don't really necessarily want to play with each other long term. Who out there believes like I'm going to be the guy to get the quote? They're not going to walk into the trap. They're not going to say it. They will never say it so long as they are together. They just won't. They won't. It's not going to happen. They're both too smart to do it. You might get little little sort of inferences or whatever, but like if you're looking for that big banner quote, you got to go over to Marcus Smart, or you got to go to Captain Accountability Ime Udoka, or like you're not going to get it obviously from Tatum and Brown. And then you have the little things, right, Mark? You have like the little the post-game Twitter spat with Tatum and Kendrick Perkins and our guy Nick Gelso getting involved, and other people stoking the flames. And I don't know, I have so many different thoughts on that we won't explore all of them, but among them, it's just like Nick had suggested, well, what's a superstar or an all-star out there doing, searching his name 30 minutes after a game and responding to Perk because he didn't tag him on Twitter. First off, I would be inclined to believe, I would like to believe Jayson Tatum is not sitting there on his phone after a loss or after a game of any kind, unless he maybe goes for 60 or something, and actually searching Twitter for his name to see what pops up. I think what's far more likely and realistic is, somebody saw it and texted it to him or said it to him, like, hey, look what Perk, a Celtics alum, is saying about you. And then he reacted. He shouldn't have reacted. Jayson Tatum should not have reacted to that. One, it wasn't that bad a tweet. He just pointed out that he didn't shoot particularly well Brown did. It wasn't like calling him out in the way that Tatum took it. But also, and Perk is right about this, whether Tatum or anybody else across the league, players today are kind of soft. They are kind of soft and feeling like they need to react to every little thing in negative criticism. But I think we also need to remember these guys are young. They're young. He's a guy in his early 20s.
Sure. But just as an example of a guy who has, people tread on his nerves on social media all the time, Kevin Durant. I mean, the guy has such a thin skin, and he is a guy who Tatum looks up to, and I'm sure he also looks at his activity on social media. But
well, that's a mistake. Don't follow Durant on social media. Don't follow ISO like Kobe. Don't.
No, but I think that Perk at this point does occupy a little real estate up in Tatum's brain. I think it's, he reacted to it. He reacted the last time. Perk took credit for it the last time. I don't know. Has he taken credit for it again?
Not that I've seen this time around.
Okay. All right. But I think that going back to the New York game, since the conversations after that game are what this team seems to be all about at the moment, including the one between Tatum and Brown, they are really trying to figure it out. And I think the second Indiana game showed how they're trying to play a little differently, trying to play a little more off the ball in situations. Ime's mixing up coverages finally. You've got to break the ISO stuff. But he's giving them a mix. It's ISO, pick and roll. It's and I think if they can find the key to that, they're playing a really good team tonight. So it could be back to ground zero. But it's I just found it really interesting what I saw the other night.
So you mentioned the good team tonight. Obviously, they're in Philadelphia. Sixers are no pushover, as we know. But I want to read this. This is a perfect segue to something that our guy, Brian Robb, part of the CLNS Media Network as well, with his podcast, The Winning Plays Pod, but also, not unlike yourself, a beat writer for the team, covers the team for Mass Live, something that he wrote about. I think this went up last night. Life gets easier from there after Friday night in Philadelphia, and then a matchup with the East leading Bulls on Saturday at the Garden. Life gets easier for January. Boston's next 8 opponents come against no top 10 NBA squads, with the toughest matchup being a 23-19 Hornets team at the Garden. In fact, the Celtics have the 7th easiest schedule in the NBA over their last 40 games of the year. So salvaging the season suddenly doesn't seem so far-fetched. From a big picture standpoint, the metrics for the Boston roster are somewhat promising, despite them being underachieving from a record standpoint. They rank 5th in the NBA in defensive efficiency, allowing 104 points per 100 possessions, despite the disastrous start to the year at that end of the floor. They have a plus 1.7 net rating on the year, which is 12th in the NBA. I'll just add as well, it's 9th on the Dunks and Threes website, right there with Chicago, and that's a website that is even better in the aggregated data because it takes strength of schedule into account. Just a point behind the likes of the Nets and Sixers. Boston's fourth quarter woes have cost them countless games, 3-11 in games decided by 5 points or fewer. They've actually been competitive in almost every game this year, despite the flawed roster. And list, the stats and everything goes on from there from B-Rob. So I read all that just to say this. Is it possible, Mark? Is it possible? And this is like the green teamer, green rim glasses, looking for what how much of this has just been bad luck? Like their net rating is better than it was last year. The team is worse, but the net rating is better. We just haven't seen it click the way we expected to see it click. How much of what we are seeing the first half of the season is bad luck?
No, it's not bad luck. You don't blow 25-point leads with bad luck. You blow those leads with lack of toughness. I mean, they've been a very mentally fragile team, and that's what they're working on now. I think the Bulls, they led the Bulls by 19 points earlier this year and lost. That's what they're trying to do now is, again, against Indy, I think Indy's biggest run was an 8-0 run in the second quarter, but they cut it down to, they cut it tight. And the Celtics, for the first time, really just immediately hit back with a 14-4 run. So, they're regrouping better.
Yeah, if you listen to Scal in that broadcast, he was getting nervous consistently, I'd say, throughout the broadcast, and every little mini Indiana run, Scal would be like, oh, they got to get a stop here and a score in the next, the next possession. They got to find a way to stop this run because you understand we've watched this for a couple of months now. Boston finds a way to just lose focus and not execute. It turns into a toilet bowl offense, and that affects them on the defensive. And the one thing I'll say about the Indiana game that I liked a lot was how much Boston and especially Jaylen Brown pushed the ball in transition. And, I know Kaufman, you, me, and Lamb have been going crazy about this. Boston, for some reason, doesn't run. And it doesn't make any sense because they have a lot of young guys with a lot of young legs that can take advantage of getting up and down the floor. And it's not like their young guys are, their young guys are wing guys, the guys that can handle the basketball. So it's not like they're young guys like some center who can't start a fast break by himself. It's Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum. Those guys can run. So when, and in Jaylen, I think last year, now I could be slightly off about this, but I've always said that Jaylen, once he finally realizes his potential and he tightens up his dribble a little bit, is going to be an absolute nightmare in transition because of the way his body is built. He's very athletic, very strong upper body. He can shield guys. And so now that he's been able to tie up his dribble a little bit, I think he was top 3 in transition points last year. If he's not top 3, he's close to it. I know he was up there throughout most of the season, but that's something where if you can find a way, if your offense is stalling, and Boston's offense, as we've seen all year, stalls. Their spacing's terrible sometimes, and Ime hopefully tinkers with lineups to get that to be less of a problem. But if your offense is stalling, Mark, isn't it a good idea to try and get some easy baskets by getting a rebound, getting the outlet pass, pushing and trying to get layups, or at least go to the free throw line? I mean, that's you look at it, and I'm not trying to say that the season's turning around here, Mark, but since we've kind of used that last Indiana game as a microcosm to say, here's what's possible. Here's what's possible. Boston using Jaylen and Jayson as guys using actions off each other to create offense, and then also using transition to get yourself easy buckets to stop runs. Because as we've talked about, defensively, Boston very good so far this season. They have lapses, everybody does, but for the most part, they're good on defense. And if they get out and run and steal 12 points a game that way, you won't blow 25-point leads to the New York Knicks.
Right. And the other element of that transition game that they should be taking advantage of a lot more, they've got a monster rebounder at the 5 who's a great passer. Why aren't we getting more outlet passes? That kind of thing. That just adds to the transition offense. But defensively, it is going to be the key. That's going to trigger their offense, and that's where they should be.
Like I mentioned, the defense is sitting top 5 defensive efficiency anyway in the NBA. The offense is still in that lower third. It's 22nd, 23rd, 24th, wherever it exactly sits right now. Now, this is, and you mentioned my buddy Landman, Evan. This is something we've been talking about going back to the start of the year. I never thought Boston, we all knew going into the year, especially based on the offseason moves, the Celtics had the potential to have an elite defense this year. And so far, for the most part, so good. Cumulative overall stats, that's where they're at. They're defending at a very high level. The offense has been far worse than what I expected, though, Mark. I thought they'd be middle of the pack, 15th. Not, it like maybe scratch the top 10, get to like 11, 12, certainly not elite, but middle of the pack. I did not see them as a, lower third, bottom 6 or 7 offense. So how much of that are you, based on, what we're just hearing from Evan, obviously, and what you were talking about, how much of that are you expecting to, water find its level, or do you feel like they generally are what we've seen this year?
I think they're really, at the start of the season, it's almost like he just gave unlimited ISO opportunities to his best scorers and tried to get by that way, tried to get by with motion. You remember what he said probably about a week and a half ago about how am I going to have to start calling plays? Yeah.
Ideally, coach, that would be nice.
You have to start calling plays and pick and roll.
It's just the Dennis Schroder roll the ball out and go have fun, have a good time.
He's probably the most likely to be gone by trade deadline.
He should be.
I mean,
a little bit. I have a take on that in a little bit.
Okay, but offensively, they're just figuring it out. It's I think it's going to be a lot different than what you've seen.
And they've obviously they've lost a lot of man games too, to injuries, to COVID. We've been talking about this for years. This is not a this year problem. We've been talking about this for years, basically since I keep bringing, I do this on Twitter from time to time just for my own amusement, but there are just so many things like bad luck things. We were talking about bad luck. There's so many bad luck things that you can just you can trace back to like the moment Danny Ainge traded Isaiah Thomas. It was, and I'm not saying that, it shouldn't have traded IT and this was the guy to build around. Like, we know what unfortunately, tragically, in NBA scope has happened to Isaiah Thomas's career with the injury and him struggling to, find a fit and playing for so many teams since. But dealing away, again, just sort of in this this mythical sense, dealing away, your heart and soul, like a guy that truly bleeds green and is just the ultimate ambassador for your organization. For this mercenary who's just one of the worst people ever, the way that we always talk about Kyrie Irving, like everything has gone to hell in a handbasket since then. And in every way, especially injuries.
Gordon Hayward's ankle.
I mean, 5 minutes in.
First night.
And it just hasn't stopped. It had, from the injuries to COVID, it has not stopped. And so, we keep talking about wanting to see some continuity from living in the moment, this group. And I don't know. I just even right now, they're playing better, but we're not seeing it. Marcus Smart's been out. He could play tonight, but we're still not seeing continuity.
Right. But with all the bad luck and so forth, what it did is it cleared the way for the Jays.
Yep.
I mean, Hayward left because he could see what was happening. He didn't want to just be left standing in the corner. He wanted the ball in his hands, so he was gone. Al leaving was another matter, but these guys, Tatum since his rookie year has just got prime opportunity to get better. And I think I think what you have to hang your hat on is those two guys together going forward. It's been a longer growth process than anybody, Ainge included, imagined. But I think this, you're going to see the greatest growth from now on.
So Perfect. I'm glad you said that. And people are talking about it constantly. Like Jalen Rose was harping about it on ESPN the other day, as he should have been, by the way. So maybe harping isn't the right way to put it, but really hammering the point home for the people. When you have two stars, like NBA or Evan was just talking about the upcoming trade deadline, which is next month, and the constant. Should the Celtics get rid of one of the Jays? And of course, if they are, naturally, it becomes Jaylen Brown, because nobody wants to trade Jayson Tatum. So really, the question is not, do you split up the Jays? It's, do you trade Jaylen Brown? That's what everybody's asking. And people bring up Bradley Beal, and people bring up Damian Lillard, and even like Michael Pina, put an article out about a Hawks related deal that didn't bring back.
Yeah, that was actually a good looking deal, but
yeah, I mean, if you have to trade a star, but you're not getting a star back, which is really where I'm going with this, Mark. If you have two young, like, have we forgotten as Celtics fans who have been begging for years to be in this situation where you have two young stars under contract for a long time? Have we forgotten how difficult it is in the NBA to find young stars and build through the draft and do that? And I realize all the different ways that they haven't done a good job building a roster around them, and that still needs to continue. But that's the key. Around them, you don't move Tatum or Brown. I'm not saying they're untouchable. You got to listen, but in an ideal world, you don't move these guys.
Yeah, I mean, you have the potential to bring in a significant number 3 to them. You don't need a top level scorer. You need a guy who can, is shooting big. I could see Chris Paul being huge on this team.
There's no way he's leaving Phoenix though. But
that type of guy.
How many of those guys
can
walking around?
Play the point.
Yeah, there's not many. There's not a lot of those like true point guards walking around. I mean, the pipe dream, and not really a pipe dream, but like the original Lonzo idea, I was very attracted to, because and I know Chicago's added a lot of things, but like Lonzo is infectious with the way he plays basketball, and like you can just see that team clicks. I mean, DeRozan's been unbelievable. Don't get me wrong, Zach LaVine's a great player. I mean, but like Lonzo does do something to a team just by being there. And there's just not a lot of those guys walking around anymore. But this whole trade Jaylen Brown or Jayson Tatum thing, like, look at around the league. There's a lot of young talent right now in this league. Like I know Adam's talking about how there's, it's hard to find young talent. Well, the past couple of years, this young talent emergence. John Morant obviously leading the train right now. Evan Mobley this year has been unbelievable, but there are other guys. Josh Giddey in Oklahoma City's been wonderful to watch. Josh Green or Jalen Green, we'll see what happens with him. He obviously has a very high ceiling, and nights you watch him play and you're like, holy cow, this guy's dynamic. Other nights you're like, he shoots too much. But there's a lot of young talent in this league. But the one thing that the Jays have had that's really unique to very, very few teams is the amount of success they achieved at such a young age. Like, you don't see, like, Evan Mobley and the Cavaliers, who are a nice story, are probably not going to the Eastern Conference Finals this year. Okay. John Morant has a real opportunity to do some damage, but the West is very, very top heavy. I'm not sure he'll get there. We'll see. Zion hasn't played this year at all, and we don't even know where he is. There's so much stuff. These two guys have accomplished a lot already, and I just feel like, and I don't know if this is true, and maybe Mark, this is just maybe me being crazy, but it feels like all the stuff that you read about splitting the Jays up comes from anonymous executives of other teams who probably are like, yeah, let's see if we can push these guys out, because having two wing players that are really good, thriving together at such a young age, like that could be a huge problem, because there's so little wing depth in the NBA that anybody that's look at Miles Bridges or Mikal Bridges out in Phoenix, how important he is to that team. And he's not the level of Jayson Tatum, but like having a guy like that is huge. Imagine if they had a guy like Jayson. Like, that's my point. You don't trade two young guys just because you can't find a way to make it work right now when they're 23 and 25. That's ridiculous. And
by the way, too, and Mark, I want you to hit on all that, but like somebody put a stat up on Twitter the other day. I wish I could remember who it was, but in the games where Tatum and Brown are both in the lineup, and it feels like the number should be bigger, but in games where over just the last couple of years, not overall all time, but over the last couple of years since it's been like their team, as we've talked about, the winning percentage is close to 700.
Yeah.
I mean, they win far more often than they lose in the regular season with those two guys available. But excuse me, whether it was Tatum, missing a lot of time last year with COVID, some time this year, Brown, obviously with the various injuries, including, so much of the end of last year, like there just hasn't been a lot of time where they've shared the floor.
And yet you should, I don't know what the number is, but you should look up their winning percentage in the playoffs when they both play together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to all this experience you guys are talking about, it's invaluable. Why would you cut that short now? It just doesn't make any sense. Jayson Tatum is going to be a top 5 player in this league eventually.
And Jaylen is going to be top, 15, 20? I mean, he's
10, maybe 10.
The encouraging stuff, like I was talking to my buddy the other night about Jaylen and why I would not trade this guy. Jaylen gets better every year, no question. The 22, 11, and 11 he had the other night. I mean, look, I love Jaylen Brown. I think the staunchest Jaylen Brown defenders would never think that he would have 11 assists in a night.
Ever.
Right. Never.
No, but the thing that drove me crazy about that game were the number of turnovers he had leading up to it. He was averaging like 4 turnovers a game, something like that. 5. Okay. But so he turned it around in that game. I mean, if he can control that, my biggest question about him is I'm not sure he's really a playmaker. I don't know if you want to run a lot of actions where he has to set up the people up.
No, I mean, those 11 assist games for Jaylen Brown, like that might never happen again. But I also don't want to see the games where he has 0 assists. Just go out there, average 4, and I'm happy. Honestly, that's I'm not looking for a ton from Jaylen Brown in that respect. Less me, more Evan. Let's talk NBA trade deadline, which is approaching. You said you wanted to touch on something with Dennis Schroder and among others. Mark, you brought it up. Schroder seemingly is a good candidate to go. To me, he has to go. He has to go. I mean, if you can get something for him, because he's not coming back next year. You're not bringing him back. You got him on a gift of a deal this year. He's helped out. He's been better than he's been not. But in terms of paving the way for the young guys, working on building within, seeing obviously what Pritchard, has the ability to be. I thought we saw it last year, but it took Ime an extra couple minutes. So seeing, Pritchard this year, when he's finally had an opportunity, use your young guys, get anything you can, get the bag of balls that Schroder can roll all out onto the floor and move the guy. It just makes sense, Evan.
So here's my thing, and I texted this to you, Adam, earlier this week, and this is sort of my hot take, and Mark can fill in the details of what he thinks. But is there like some robust market for Dennis Schroder that I don't know about? Because I mean, who the hell needs Dennis Schroder right now? This is the thing. I'm like, just the Celtics will trade Dennis Schroder and everything's gonna be fine. I'm like, yeah, well, you got to find a trade partner for Dennis Schroder. I understand it's a small expiring contract, and he's a veteran that can come off the bench and give you points, and that's valuable. But we've seen it with Boston this year. It hasn't been always super smooth. So, Mark, my question is there actually a trade market for Schroder, or is this just wishful thinking on the behalf of Celtics Nation here?
It would have to be a playoff team who needs the scoring, in the backup role. Otherwise, it's his contract. Some GM wants to get out from underneath something, you bring him in and he's off the books. I mean,
wasn't there a report the other day somebody had linked Schroder to Minnesota? I could be making that up entirely, but I feel like I saw that. And that's a team that's sitting right now in the play-in tournament mix.
That's a team that's probably desperate to make the playoffs because they haven't done anything of any worth since KG was there. So, and that's the first KG go around. The second one. And Anthony Edwards has really transformed that team and give them a real identity. So, I would, maybe it's a team like that that's desperate, and this has been Sacramento over the past few years where they're like, this is the inclusion of the play-in tournament has now allowed for more teams to think that they're hanging around. So when everybody's trying to get Harrison Barnes out of Sacramento last year, they're trying to be buyers and trying to find a way to get into the playoffs where everybody with a brain It's like there's no way Sacramento's going to the playoffs. So now here we are, they're a complete mess, dumpster fire, and they don't know what to do anymore. But
yeah, there have been reports out of Sacramento, De'Aaron Fox, Harrison Barnes,
right.
Tyrese Halliburton, all these guys that could potentially be on the move. I think, unfortunately, you do have, to your point, you have a bunch of teams that are, in that play-in tournament mix, Celtics included, obviously,
right.
that as you sit here right now, a few weeks out from the trade deadline, we don't know whether the hell they're going to be. Are they buyers? Are they sellers? Do they do nothing? There are a lot of teams that are in that same boat.
Yeah, I think there'll be a buyer for a small piece or a complementary piece. The name I've been talking about since last year, who I think would fit perfectly on this team, is Terrence Ross. I think
he kills the Celtics every time he plays. It's like the old Doc Rivers thing. Anybody that beats him, he just tries to go and get the next season.
Right.
Terrence Ross has had so many games against Boston that he kills him. It would make a lot of sense.
He's just you bring him off the bench and tell him to get buckets. That's sort of what they need when they stall from the starting unit.
Yeah.
Well, it would help the drop off because I was looking for this tweet earlier and it got deleted. So maybe the data was wrong, but there was a stat flown out there in the Twitter sphere that when Jaylen and Jayson are on the floor together, they have like a +5 rating this season.
Yeah.
When they're not on the floor together, the Celtics have like a -20 something rating, which is the biggest discrepancy of any duo in the NBA. On-off splits, which again, if you've been watching the Celtics, this is not shocking to anybody. Getting a nice wing player like Terrence Ross who can score would obviously help that balance out a little bit, because when one of them's on the floor together, you see the defenses and they shift very clearly onto one of those two guys, and the guys around them can't. I love some of the guys on this team. I really do. I think there's a lot of, I like Richardson quite a bit. I pounded the table for Schroder in the past, but I've jumped off that train pretty quickly. But those guys aren't creating offense by themselves. Like Josh Richardson is not a guy that's going to create that offense. They need a guy that can create their own offense and get to the basket. And Ross can absolutely do that. And that's, again, it wouldn't cost you a ton, I don't think. I
think he signed for 2 years.
Yeah.
But don't know.
An obvious fit because they need wing scoring, and like it's obviously not coming from Neesmith, it's not coming from Richardson. I don't know if they have. Grant is not even really a wing player. He's really kind of more of a small big. Happens to be on the perimeter, but they don't. And if Grant gets the ball and takes 4 dribbles, it's never going to end well. So you need a guy that's comfortable with the ball in his hands, can make his own play when things break down, because everybody's piling on either Jaylen or Jayson. And that's a great idea, Mark.
So guys, in Philadelphia, well, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was going to say Grant's development as a shooter is something that's going to get better too. If he's the guy in the corner when they corral the 2 J's, I actually think he's played well enough where maybe you should think about starting him ahead of Al.
Lock him in the corner, cement those sneakers to the court in those 2 corners, please. The more of it, the better. So before we let you go, in Philadelphia tonight, at home against the Bulls tomorrow, I don't think I'm alone in believing the Celtics are going to take one out of the 2 of those games. So which one's it going to be? Which one is going to be the nice surprise game, Mark?
I think tomorrow. I think the Bulls game.
I agree. It makes no sense at all. It's like when they beat Phoenix and blew the doors off them, like in a 3:00 afternoon Sunday game, whoever it was. It was like, they have a chance to get back to 500. They probably won't, because that Phoenix game. Like, I think Adam, like literally quoting you at this point, that show you were like, "There's no way they get back to 500 because that Phoenix game's sitting there. There's no way they're going to win that game." Yeah, as I say this means now they're actually going to win that game. Yeah. This Bulls game has the same exact feel of that, where it's like playing Philly, then Bulls. Second night of back-to-back. The Bulls have been probably my favorite storyline all year, to be frankly honest with you. It's a fun team to watch. Would make no sense to beat that team considering how Boston has played this season, but that would absolutely be right on par for the course for the Celtics team the past couple of years.
Well, you both left out one key detail as to why it's that Bulls game tomorrow night. It's because it's directly opposite the Patriots game and nobody's going to be watching. So the Celtics are probably going to have their best game of the
year. Yeah.
That's fair. All right, very good. So, look, we talked about it earlier. The schedule after these 2, it does get much lighter. So the Celtics have a real opportunity to jump up that Eastern Conference. We'll see. As long as, like, praise be to whoever it is that you pray to, that they can stay healthy, at least their key guys, and just give us a few weeks, give us 2-3 weeks of continuity. And I think that we'll actually see some good things from this team. Of course, Evan, he is here every week. I'm here as more often than not. And Mark Murphy, our good pal. Mark, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Okay.
All right, Celtics Beat, folks. See you later.